A side, B side, what side are you on?
Well, hello, Adam. Welcome back to another episode of A Side, B Side. Or should I do A Side, B Side? What side are you on? Or remix.
We gotta do a remix. Yeah. Just switch you saying, and then I'll just do like the world's worst beatboxing. I don't even think I could call that beatboxing. It sounded like I was having a coughing fit. So we are what, episode 98?
Yes, and we just got done with another Patreon. So if you have not joined us on Patreon, we would love for you to. Patreon.com/A-Side-B-Side podcast.
It's not cost prohibitive. You don't have to. It's cheaper than a cup of coffee.
It really is, although it will be going towards coffee.
Yeah, it's. You ever thought about buying us a copy? You can just do it on Patreon.
Or you can literally buy us a copy. That's fine too. Buy us a coffee.com/A-Side-B-Side pod. Yeah, you can do that too.
So how was your week?
Really good. Went to really good and really bad at the same time. Okay, so my youngest that lives with me has gone to visit her sister, and then she's gonna be staying there while her sister goes and does like an immersion program over in another country. So this is the first time. Okay, so my youngest is a bit of a mama's girl, and I am a bit of a. We were joking last night. I'm a bit of a her girl. She's a bit of a me girl because we are very codependent. And so even when she was in college, she was coming home all the time. Like her first year in college, she came home every single weekend for like the first 6 months.
Oh wow.
And so then of course COVID hit, and I told her you can't do that anymore. And so she got into college or whatever. And I got used to her not being home. Then COVID hit and she was home for like months. And then she went back for just a little bit, and then she graduated. So since she has graduated a year and a half ago, we have not been apart more than like a week.
Oh wow.
So
and you moved.
And we moved together, right? So of course that we were already very close anyway, but moving and having to be each other's, shoulders to lean on.
Mm-hmm.
So she's gonna be gone for like several weeks. And so I'm like trying to find all the things to do to keep me busy, because part of me inside is like, I remember when my kids were little and they would go stay with my mom for the summer, like a month or so in the summer. And I mean, like the first week or so, I was depressed.
Mm.
So I'm trying not to get there, but part of me is like, oh my gosh. And she said to me, she said, I know, and this is what really got me, because I was trying to be all tough and stuff. And then she's like, I know I act all independent and stuff. She's like, but I actually really need you. And I was like, oh my God. Oh my God.
It's pretty awesome to hear though. That's yeah.
It is. But it was like, I was like, you'll be fine. And I was like, of course, if you need me, I'll be right there. Like,
yeah. Well, and how long is she staying in? Is she gonna be gone?
She's gonna be gone like 4 weeks.
Like a whole month.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I know.
Thanks.
So
well, that's a fun little adventure though.
It is, and it's good for her because she'll be on her own completely.
And it's good for you.
It's good for me. It's good for me to find me again, and it's good for her because she needs to know she can do this.
Yeah.
And she's stepping into it so easily because everything her sister like is paying her. It's her sister's place, so she's got the rent and the food all covered. So
yeah.
I mean, it's just she needs to know that she can be on her own. So it is good for her.
Well, it's also tough that like it's an area that she doesn't know either.
Yeah.
And that just adds, a little bit, but it's kind of like going on vacation before she'll get to know people.
So there's that. But also yesterday went to a really fun concert, so like as I was dropping her off and I'm like crying, and then I was like, okay, well, let's go to this concert and I'm gonna smile and have a good time. So
it'll be great.
It's gonna be so fun.
I'm not sad whatsoever.
But yeah, so there's that. That's me. That's what's going on. What about you?
Just getting through this heat wave. We topped 100 last week, which is the first time this year in Minnesota, and that was super exciting. Been catching up on my shows. Finally, stepped into watching the Obi-Wan series, and that's been fun.
Mm-hmm.
I am reading an absolutely ridiculous book that will probably ridiculous. I don't know what word I said, but it wasn't ridiculous. I think I accidentally just said a curse in Harry Potter world. Absolutely ridiculous book by James Patterson, and he's partnered with another writer. But way back when, probably somewhere in the 40s or 50s episodes, maybe 60s, we did one on The Shadow, the 1990s movie with Alec Baldwin, and I talked about the old radio plays because I found a couple vinyls and listened to the radio plays. Well, James Patterson has, because the character is now in public domain, he's written a new The Shadow, and I was like, oh, this could be interesting, but it is so out of left field. Like, Lamont Cranston, The Shadow, is poisoned in the 1920s, 30s, and suddenly he goes to this warehouse and he gets put into basic cryogenic freezing, and he wakes up 150 years later in a post-apocalyptic world where Khan has taken over everything as the president of the world and everyone's living in squalor. And it's just like, whoa, what? What is going on? Mm-hmm. So I'm enjoying it. It's a very quick read, but my goal of trying to get at least 30 minutes of reading done every day is continued. So I haven't watched as many shows lately, and it's been so hot. Like when you're outside, you just can't look at screens. Because one, I was sitting on the roof deck and reading my book, just had my phone out, and it was sitting next to me on the lounger, and the sun's beating on it, and all of a sudden it's just like I get the alert that's like, I'm turning off now.
Yes.
Because it's too hot. Like, you forget in the summer when stuff gets too hot, it can't work. So it's nice to have some paperbacks and some books today to read. So I've been reading more, and that's actually for the second week in a row, the A side is going to be about a book that you should read.
Okay, well, if you're ready, I'm ready.
I am. All right, let's do. Jumping into the A side. As I mentioned, I've been trying to read 30 minutes every day. It's one of my goals for the summer. Not happening every day, but happens every once in a while, and I'm getting better at it. And so I've been working through this James Patterson book, but it's very over the top. But I've also been slow rolling on the Obi-Wan Kenobi series on Disney Plus. And I've been very hesitant to dive in because I noticed that the parts of Star Wars that have been made in the last 10 years that I really enjoy have been the original stories. I mean, Rogue One, with this, telling everything of how the plans were stolen and gotten to Princess Leia right before Star Wars: A New Hope begins, I thought was outstanding. The Mandalorian series, both season 1 and 2, where basically these are all new characters with a couple of like familiar characters scattered in. I think those have been my favorite stories. I haven't loved when they keep trying to make all of Star Wars about, the Skywalker family in some connection. Mm-hmm. And I was really excited about this series when I heard it was announced, because in my brain, it was going to be Obi-Wan Kenobi, like kind of doing a Clint Eastwood Western in space where he's roaming through the small towns of Tatooine and like, righting wrongs and yada, yada, yada. And in the first episode, I find out, oh, crud, they're going to make this about Luke and Leia the entire time. And then it was even more so. And spoiler alert, if you haven't watched it, the young actress who plays 10-year-old Leia does an amazing job. And in my opinion, probably carries, I'm only through episode 3, and I think there's 3 more. But so far has made it less hard to accept that we're doing this, because I know they want to have the characters, but it's not Carrie Fisher. And but it's also, I'm glad it's not just somebody else and Carrie Fisher, like CGI.
Right.
So that's been good. But one of the things that it reminded me of is they're dealing a lot with, here's you got this 10-year-old brilliant kid who's a princess, but also just a kid who has all these questions about her family. And one of the things that it's been hard for me to accept or reconcile with the new, since Disney bought the Star Wars universe, is that there was this entire, 2.5 decades worth of books, novels, comic books that were all written, and this giant universe, these stories that were told, that when Disney bought it, they were like, yep, none of that matters anymore. And I read a lot of those books, the Timothy Zahn trilogy, which they've, Disney smartly has gone back and sort of cherry picked some of the best characters and the best stories from the legends, as they call them now, and imported them into the world. Like Thrawn has shown up, and there's talk of him having a series. And one that popped up was one of my favorite books, which came out back in 1994. It was the fourth Star Wars novel that I picked up, or at least fourth in my mind. It may have come out somewhere around the same time as Dark Forces Rising, but after Heir to the Empire. And it's called The Truce at Bakura. And it literally takes place right minutes after the ending of Return of the Jedi. You've got, they're having the Stormtrooper barbecue, and they burn Darth Vader in effigy, and the Ewoks are all dancing around playing Stormtrooper skulls like they're bongos, which in hindsight means they were probably eating Stormtrooper, which is just a little disturbing when you think about it that way. As a kid, never figured out 2 and 2 together there. But it's this entire story of what happens next. And I remember loving the book, and I picked it back up because there was a very specific scene that I wanted to reread within the book. And it's a quick read. You're looking, I've got it in paperback. It's about, 340 pages. But it deals a lot with what happens next, whether that's the Empire has just fallen, and now not everybody knows yet. I mean, it takes time for word to spread that, Darth Vader's been overthrown. And like, you hear about stories in real life where there were islands in the South Pacific that you'd have a Japanese soldier who was stationed there and didn't know for years that World War II was over, because no one had, reached them because they were so remote. So the same thing would happen within a galaxy, because everything is just so spread out. And Endor is pretty far out there. It's not like it's a core planet where it's like right on a trade route and everything. So it would probably take a while for the word to get out. And Han and Luke and Leia and all the rebel forces intercept a message that comes from a probe droid, which almost kills Wedge Antilles, that there is an invasion on a small planet called Bakura of these alien forces that are invading this Imperial garrison. And so the rebels decide they're going to go and, help them fight off the aliens. And this becomes a very strange, and that's why it's called, truce. You've got the Imperial remnant and you've got the rebel forces having to band together to fight off this third other force. And what I loved about it is here, it's coming out in the mid 90s. And in my brain, I have always thought, and still to this day, I used to be sure of it. Now I'm kind of just hoping that like the only thing that would really make the human race get together and like stop fighting each other would be if we had something else to fight. And then we had COVID and no one believed it. So maybe it has to literally be little green men for us to come together. I don't know.
Right.
But the entire story is about these two factions that don't trust each other, are at war, having to fight off another, and the political intrigue and the, double crossing and all of that thing that happens. But a big part of the story also, and the reason that I picked the book back up and specifically went to find this scene, is that Leia just figured out that the guy who tortured her in A New Hope and who destroyed all of Alderaan and who has been terrorizing the universe for all of her life is her dad. And this is really one of the few books that I remember that dealt with that. And I've been doing, I've gone and found other people reviewing the book, and a lot of the people are like, well, there's not enough action, and it was so political, and there was, I was very, very slow paced and boring. But I was like, as a 13-year-old reading this book, I was like, if I just found out that my father was the person that I hated most in the world,
right, and
had been actively fighting against for all of my life, that's going to mess my brain up a little bit. And then in The Truce at Bakura, while Leia is trying to, find a diplomatic solution where the Imperials and the rebels can work together to fight off the alien invasion, or maybe negotiate with the aliens so they decide not to attack. And the alien's name is the Shiruk, which I'm sure I'm pronouncing incorrectly, but I don't speak Shiruki, so that's why.
So it might lead to a little,
Yeah, who knows how to pronounce it? So that's why I keep just saying the aliens. While all of this is happening, in kind of my opinion, is sort of a dick move, Anakin Skywalker appears to her as a Force ghost and asks for her forgiveness. How do you you don't even have time to process it, and you're just going to show up and be like, hey, sorry, I was like the Hitler of space for a while. Do you forgive me? And how powerful as a kid reading that scene, and how conflicted she was, and how everything else is happening at the same time. And at one point she sympathizes with rebels on the planet, and then the Imperials throw her into jail. And this was also the period in Legends where every book tried to give Luke a new love interest, and it was like they were trying to like James T. Kirk him, so he was in every new book he was falling in love with somebody else. And that whole side plot was something I never really understood. Like, why do we have this? Because they clearly wanted to have a love story, and he was the only single character at that point. But in all of this, you have this incredibly hard to read scene where Leia has to deal with not only accepting who her father was and everything that happened, but then he shows up and asks for forgiveness as a ghost, which I don't know if a ghost shows up for the first time and they ask for it, just it's a very strange scene, but it was so powerful. And I remembered it from the moment, like as we're watching Obi-Wan, and the young actress at one point asked Obi-Wan Kenobi, she's like, "Are you my real father?" And this is a question that this character has been asking themselves for years, and now to find out who it was and to have to deal with it was just, for me, a very powerful memory. And that it's a book that I haven't read in almost 30 years, and I immediately was taken back to that scene and had to go dig it out of storage and read it again. It is frustrating to me that the stories in the Legends are not canon anymore, but the Bakura has been mentioned in other newer Star Wars things. In the Star Wars Resistance cartoon, it's mentioned, and they're slowly starting to kind of, as I said, cherry pick characters and stories out of it. And I would be really interested in maybe, if they did. I think the only way they're going to do more stories about Luke and Leia and Han right after the core trilogy is if they do them animated. And I think that would be a really interesting way to do it. And there were several people who I found on YouTube and on articles written on the internet that said that this is like the worst Star Wars book that they've ever read. And I really don't agree with that at all, because I think there's a lot more to it. It's definitely a different style Star Wars book, and I think it would be a very interesting, sort of anime cartoon style, a little bit more, sure, not super kid friendly, because it's about politics and it's about truces and not war. But definitely glad I picked it back up. If you've been watching the Obi-Wan series and you're enjoying the character of Leia as much as I am, and have always felt like there was so much more to her story that needed to be told. Even though it's not canon, I highly recommend picking up the Truce of Bakura. It is a quick read. It is intriguing. And for the scene alone of her and Anakin, it will stick with you. And for $6.99, you can do a lot worse. Or if you've got Audible on Amazon, it's one Audible credit. And if you're like me and you get the email saying, hey, you've got
15 credits.
You got 15 credits you got to use, or they're going to expire. Maybe just throw one at Truce of Bakura by Kathy Tyers, and you can listen to it in audiobook. It is read by Anthony Held, who is, I thought for a second was the guy from Buffy, but very similar name. It's not.
Right. Anthony,
right.
Yeah. Because he's on Ted. Ted Lasso.
Ted Lasso, yeah. So it's one of my favorite books because of how it looked at Star Wars in a different way, with the politics and the relationships. And there's even this whole subplot of Han and Leia have just kind of started dating.
Mm-hmm.
So Han basically just goes on this mission because he wants to hang out with Leia, and because he'd left, empire. He got frozen in carbonite and then gets woken up, and now he's fighting in this war as you know a sort of general, and he's like, oh, I'm just gonna hang up. I'm gonna go with you because I want to hang out with you, but they can't they don't get any time together. It was very interesting. Like, how does this relationship blossom when everything they've gone through has been a traumatic experience? Right. It's like in action movies when the heroine and the hero get together at the end of the movie, but all they've known is like running from monsters or driving a bus over 55 miles an hour so it doesn't explode. Like, what do they talk about on a boring Tuesday? And how do they make a relationship work? So that's a fun little good subplot as well. So the A-side today dedicated to the Legends version, Star Wars: The Truce of Bakura by Kathy Tyers. You can check it out simply for a couple of those small subplots alone, and I highly recommend it. And don't let anybody on YouTube with bad backgrounds tell you that backgrounds behind them, not that they're bad people. They might be. I don't know. They've got bad book opinions. Don't let them tell you it's the worst one they've ever read.
All right. I don't know anything about Star Wars, so I had really no input, except Mandalorian looks good on Disney Plus.
Yeah. Have you, and you don't have to if you don't want to share, people will come for you. Have you watched the original trilogy?
No.
I kind of had that feeling.
It's not like anything that like, oh, I'm so anti Star Wars or anything. It's just I just happen to not have seen it.
Yeah, that's completely understandable. I'm not one of those people that will like freak out and be like, oh my gosh, you have to see it, because I think now there are certain movies you have to see at certain points of your life for them to connect.
Mm-hmm.
And watching a 45-year-old movie with questionable special effects and a kind of clunky plot is probably not going to be the thing that gets you into Star Wars. Like, go watch The Mandalorian if it's your first time, because that one's a little bit more grab your attention for the day. It'd be like going to be like, hey guys, you want to watch Romeo and Juliet? Would you like to watch the 3.5-hour stage version recorded from a single camera back in the 1920s, or would you like to go see it at the local park? Go to the park one. It's going to be
right. All right, so there you go. That is the A-side. Do you have a picture of the book that you want to send?
I do. I will add that. I will send it to you as well. Okay, and then our links and things. I even included the YouTube video of the guy who hates it, because I was like, what the heck? He's wrong. But we can give him some views so you can, hear how wrong he is.
All right, there you go. All right, so is that the A-side?
That's the A-side.
If you didn't know, June is Pride Month. And so the story we're talking about today on the outside was a very seemingly beautiful, progressive family. It was the Harts, Jennifer and her wife, and their beautiful adopted 6 children, who all happen to be Black. But under the surface, because this is a true crime podcast.
Yeah. So
it was not quite as picture perfect as it seemed.
And this might be one of the few that I think I know about before you even start. So I'm excited about that.
And I think partly because they were in your area for a little while.
Yeah, and Minnesota is like, if the news can find any remote connection to a news story that has, like, if they visited Minnesota, if they once like bought a Dylan album, or they liked Prince, like they'll be like, well, they'll shoehorn it in there. They're like, oh, this thing happened in South Florida, but the family once visited Minnesota in 1978, so we think you'd like it. Okay, cool.
So Jennifer Hart was born in June of 1979, and her wife, Sarah Margaret Gengler Hart, was born April 8th of 1979. So just, a couple months apart.
Mm-hmm.
They're both from South Dakota. Jennifer was originally from Huron, whereas Sarah was from Big Stone City. So both of the women,
a lot of stones there.
A lot of stones. Both of them are the oldest in their family. Jennifer had 2 siblings and Sarah had 3 siblings. So Jennifer attends Huron High School. Sarah attended high school in Minnesota. The 2 women actually meet at Northern State University, and that's where they in Aberdeen, South Dakota, and that's where they begin their relationship. For years, the two told people that they were just friends or roommates before coming out. Sarah had initially attended University of Minnesota for a semester and then transferred over to Northern State. And Jennifer started at Augustana University before transferring over to Northern State University. They both majored in early education. Sarah focused on special education. So Sarah graduates in 2002, and Jennifer is like, well, all right, Sarah's done. I'm out. So she leaves. She doesn't graduate. She just leaves.
Cool.
And so the two get married. They get married in Connecticut in 2009. But before that, Sarah had actually petitioned a court to have her last name changed to Hart. It was Gangler, and she changes it to Hart. And then in 2009, they go to Connecticut to get married because at that time, same-sex marriage was not legal in every state. Mm-hmm. So Jennifer was quite active. Jennifer also the more just dominant personality. Jennifer was also very social media active, especially on Facebook. And she had stated on Facebook one time that when they were in South Dakota, they did not come out as a couple. And that when they did finally come out, they actually lost friends. She said, quote, that Midwestern mindset was relentlessly unforgiving and unaccepting. Now, this has been years ago, and in some areas in the Midwest, yes, it is still like that. You know, here in Nebraska, there are certain areas that are very progressive, but other than that, no, it's not. There's still that Midwestern mindset.
Yeah, you can find that sort of older mindset in anywhere in the country, even California, New York.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Mm-hmm. So in 2004, they lived in Minnesota. They lived in Alexandria, Minnesota, and they both worked at the Herberger's store. Have you ever heard of a Herberger's?
Yeah, Herberger's is just like a Dayton's or Macy's, you know, a Marshall Fields, just a department store type of thing. Usually was the end cap at a mall.
Yeah.
You know, it came into Minnesota relatively later. Like I think at one point they partnered with Dayton's, but I don't know the entire history.
Oh, okay. So of course they're in a new location and they decide, you know what, we're not going to hide anymore because it's new location, new people, new friends, they can start fresh. Sarah becomes the manager at the Herberger's. They move around a bit here, a bit there. Sarah becomes a manager at a Kohl's in Washington. They end up in Texas, right? And so it's while they're in Texas that they decide that they would like to adopt and start a family. So they actually received funding from the state of Texas. But before we even get into their 6 children that they adopted.
There's a lot of kids.
Uh-huh. So prior to adopting their 6 children, they were fostering another child. It was a 5-year-old girl who's now in her 20s. A week before their first 3 children were due to arrive, while they were still fostering this young girl who they told they were going to adopt and be for her forever home, they take her to a session with her therapist. They drop her off and they never come back. The therapist then, during their session, has to tell the young girl, they're not coming back. She never heard from them again. There was never an explanation. They just drop her off at the therapist's office.
Wow.
So Abigail was born in 2003. Hannah Jean was born in 2002. And Marcus was born in 1998. They were all adopted by Jennifer and Sarah while in Colorado County in Texas. They were placed with the Harts on March 4th of 2006. And they were adopted September of 2006.
Just all happened very quickly.
Very quickly. So now think about this. Before 2006 is when they received their first 3. So early 2006, 2005 frame is when they had the young girl that they just dropped off and never went back to.
Eesh.
So a couple of years later, in 2008, they adopt three more children: Sierra Masia, who was born in 2005, Devontae Jordan in 2002, and Jeremiah Hart, who was born in 2004. They all came from Houston. So their biological mom, Sherry, had lost custody because she had substance abuse issues. She lost them in August of 2006. So then they were sent to live with their father's sister, their paternal aunt, Priscilla. But the condition was they are to have no contact with their mother. Unfortunately, Priscilla had to work. She didn't have anybody else to babysit, so she allowed their mom to babysit. A caseworker found out, and they were removed from her care, and she was prevented from getting permanent custody.
Doing the one thing you're told you can't do is usually not going to work out well.
Yeah. So Sherry Davis's children, the three, were then put into foster care. There's actually an older brother, Dante, who's also put into foster care. He was not adopted by the Harts. He had behavioral issues. So now they've got their 6 children, and the Hart tribe was, I guess you can say, complete, and they look like to be the model of a progressive 21st century family. You've got
a lot of kids, a
lot of kids. You've got this same-sex, these 2 white female same-sex couple adopting these 6 Black children. You know, I mean, they're the poster for modern progressive family, right?
Yeah, more modern family than modern family.
Exactly. Now, you may remember 12-year-old Devontae, who came into the spotlight, the national spotlight, during the Ferguson protests in Portland, Oregon. There was a photo of Devontae who was crying as he embraced a police officer. It was Officer Darren Wilson during the 2004 protests. That of course, the protest resulted from the controversial decision of the Michael Brown case, or I should say the officers, not Michael Brown, but what the officers did to Michael Brown, and that unrest that resulted as that. So the image became known as the hug felt around the world. So of course, who got this picture? Mom Jennifer. She posted on her Facebook, and of course it goes viral. Jennifer is always constantly posting pictures of the family. They look so happy. She's also sharing her thoughts on race and politics. She shares all of the trips that the family's going on. They wear matching outfits and matching jammies, and they just look like a beautiful, loving, happy family.
They're the social media, darling, everything looks good. Everything is perfect and progressive and great.
Right.
I remember that photo was everywhere. Every news organization picked it up. I'm sure it was on magazine covers. It was almost uses this sort of red herring of like, look, we're healing.
So speaking of Facebook, on the 9th anniversary of 3 of the adoptions, Jennifer wrote, quote, "I am a better human in every possible way for knowing these children. They have been my greatest teachers. Contrary to popular notion that we can't choose our family, we absolutely can. We choose by loving, and that's worth celebrating every day." Okay. So of course, like I said, they're often on social media looking like the happy family, traveling, music festivals, hiking. They even attended some political rallies. Like in 2016, the family attended a rally for Bernie Sanders in Vancouver, Washington, and they all showed up wearing matching Bernie t-shirts. But things not as happy as they appeared on Facebook.
Just as it is for anyone.
So in 2008, the family was living in Alexandria, Minnesota, and a teacher observed bruises on Hannah's left arm. And she was told that she'd been hit by her mom, Jennifer, with a belt. So within months, all 6 children are pulled out of public school because, of course, when she tells the teachers, investigation starts. So they're all pulled out of public school.
They're legally obligated to report.
In 2011, Abigail said she had owies on her back and stomach, and she said she actually didn't feel safe with her moms. They had actually beaten her and had put cold water over her, all because of a penny that they thought she had stolen.
Thanks.
So this, of course, is reported. Authorities become involved, and all the children claim that they are being spanked constantly and deprived of food. So Sarah steps up and she takes responsibility. She says that her anger got out of control, but the Oregonian newspaper said it was actually Jennifer who had hit Abigail and gave her the owies.
So we may have one partner covering for another out of guilt.
So Sarah, even though it was Jennifer who allegedly did the assault, Sarah originally was charged with domestic assault and a malicious punishment, but pled guilty to domestic assault charge, and the malicious punishment charge was dropped. She was sentenced to 90 days in jail, but it was commuted to 1 year of supervised probation.
This is well after they were social media darlings, and I don't remember it being reported at all at the time.
No, nobody really knew what was happening. So a year later, Hannah again tells the school nurse that she's not eaten all day. Sarah claims that Hannah is just playing the food card and says, just give her some water. She's fine. She's eaten. Shortly after that, they're all pulled out of school and they're homeschooled again. Well, they moved from Minnesota to Oregon. And of course, there's more allegations of abuse. In 2013, authorities have separate interviews of everybody in the family, as well as interviews of people who know the family. 2 family friends state that the children were forced to raise their hand before speaking, and they couldn't wish each other happy birthday or laugh at the dinner table. Other people actually reported that the children weren't really well fed and looked a little malnourished and small for their age.
It's a lot of mouths to feed.
One friend said that Jennifer had ordered pizza for the children, but each child was only allowed to have one small slice. And that when Jennifer discovered that the pizza was gone, she punished the children by not feeding them breakfast and forcing them to lie in bed for 5 hours. There were some friends that state that the children appeared very afraid of their mother, Jennifer, and they trained them like robots. Fast forward to 2017, we're in Washington. They had moved to Woodland, Washington. While they're in Woodland, Washington, their daughter Hannah jumps out of her second-story bedroom window about 1:30 in the morning, and she runs next door to her neighbors, Dana and Bruce DeKalb. Bruce said she wanted us to take her to Seattle because they weren't treating her right. Hannah is pleading, please don't make me go back. They're racists and they abuse us. She appeared to be missing her 2 front teeth, and she looked way younger than what she should have looked. So the Harts end up finding out about Hannah. They go over to the DeKalbs. They get her back. The next day, Jennifer goes back over to the DeKalbs to apologize for Hannah's actions, and she says that Hannah was not telling the truth and that the children occasionally act out because they're, quote, drug babies, and that it could also be bipolar issues because Hannah's mom was bipolar. So then after this incident with Hannah, Dana and Bruce DeKalb have some contact with Devontae, the one who went viral. He's begging for food. He is begging them for food. And he's like, please, please don't tell our moms about this. Please don't tell, because they'll get upset. So they start sneaking food to the children. As they're sneaking food to the children, and then you've got this incident with Hannah, I guess the DeKalbs kind of discussed it amongst themselves, and they report Jennifer and Sarah to the police and to the Washington State Department of Social Services. So caseworkers from DSHS they go to the house and they try to get in contact with the Harts. The first time was March 23rd, 2018, and they leave a business card. They return the next day. There's no sign of the family, no record of the card. The card's gone. So they've obviously seen the card. On March 26th of 2018, just after 3 a.m., Jennifer and Sarah Hart get into their GMC Yukon XL, and they drive over a 100-foot cliff on California State Route 1 in Mendocino County, California. The bodies of 5 of their children, Hannah, Marcus, Jeremiah, Abigail, and Sierra, were found in or near the vehicle, which had ended up turned upside down on the beach below the cliff. The body of Devontae, as of a report of March of this year, still has never been found. A Superior Court judge ruled that Devontae was in fact in the vehicle at the time of the crash, and therefore issued a death certificate for him in April of 2018. So there was analysis of the SUV by experts, and they said that the SUV's internal airbag deployment computer determined that it was an intentional thing. They did drive it off the cliff. It wasn't like they swerved and it was an accident.
The brakes didn't go out.
The brakes didn't go out. It actually accelerated to 20 miles per hour in 3 seconds. Also, there, like we said, there's no brake marks, no skid marks on the road or the top of the cliff. There was a 14-member coroner's jury that unanimously ruled that the case was a murder-suicide. There was an inquest called to determine the cause of death, but there wasn't any responsibility in any civil or criminal cases. I mean, the California Highway Patrol stated that the criminal prosecution wasn't possible because, well, the responsible parties are gone.
Right.
They were responsible. They did say that they were responsible, but how can they prosecute them?
Okay. No point at that point.
So there was toxicology reports done on Jennifer and Sarah and on the children. So they found that Jennifer's blood alcohol content level was over the legal limit, and that Sarah and 2 of the children had diphenhydramine in their system. Sarah, before the crash, she had made Google searches about the lethality of Benadryl. Her searches.
That information must have come from the provider. I mean, it's not like they were probably able to recover the phone.
Well, these were on her computer at home.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So her searches also included no-kill shelters for dogs, but the 2 dogs were found inside their home. The Mendocino County Sheriff's Department officially closed the case and released declassified records in 2019. The sheriff, Tom Allman, was quoted as saying, "This was more than a crime. This was an out-and-out conspiracy to kill 6 kids." The police officer that was seen hugging Devontae during the protests, he said that this tragic news about Devontae and his family deeply saddens me. The short interaction with Devontae reinforced my love, passion, and duty in providing service to my community. Can I just say I didn't realize that the coroner could convene a jury?
Yeah, that's new for me. I mean, I guess we don't deal with a lot of cases where everyone involved is no longer around. But I mean, do you want to have a cause of death? I'm sure legally there were probably might have been debts or assets or something that they needed to determine. But yeah, that's new for me.
So we mentioned the sheriff, Tom Allman. He also said that oversights in the system and Jennifer and Sarah are to blame for these tragic deaths of these 6 beautiful lives.
And it's that, I think that is the most frustrating part, that how many times the kids asked for help. It wasn't, they came to teachers, they came to neighbors, and the system couldn't help
completely failed them. And I mean, this is not the first time we've seen this. There was a story on Netflix, a little boy being abused by his parents, and like caseworker after caseworker, they kept going and they never removed him from the home. And then his stepfather or his mom's boyfriend ended up killing him. It happened. It could be prevented. And it's like, come on.
That is probably the number one thing after 98 episodes of this, is how many times either a person was stopped from continuing by the second or third time and how it could have kept going, but how more often than not they could have been caught so much earlier and they're not, and something could have been stopped, and for some reason it wasn't, and that is so
It's so
disheartening.
frustrating. It's so frustrating. It's so sad. But that is the story of the Hart family murders.
And I remember hearing the news story, and it was not reported as anything other than a car accident 1st.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a while before it came out that there was more nefarious things going on.
And I think, okay, look, you've adopted these children and you've realized, hey, maybe we can't handle this. Don't kill them. Take them. Hey, look, I'm sorry. We're trying. We cannot handle this. This is a responsibility that we can't handle. We don't need. And so as to not hurt you or ourselves, we're going to have to put into the foster care system or give you to a family member, something else besides murdering them.
The kids would have been better off if they just left them at home when they decided to drive off a cliff.
Oh, man.
Those kids would have gone to the neighbors and they would have gotten help.
It's awful. It's awful. But I remember, like you said, that picture was everywhere. And I remember that picture. And then I was on TikTok or something, and it was like, hey, do you remember this picture? And I was like, oh yeah. And then I was like, oh my gosh. Like I hadn't heard of that side of it.
Yeah, it all came out much later, and the news media certainly didn't share the full story right away. Understandably, it was an investigation going on, but
Yeah.
I wonder if the fact that they kept moving made it harder on the system as well.
That probably did. I'm sure that added to it. Yeah.
Resetting the clock, and then the new this is the first time we've been called to this house. We don't know this family. We don't have a record. Or if they stayed in Alexandria, they stayed in Texas. Took till they got to third or fourth location before things seemed to be progressing to a point where they knew they were going to get caught. But
yeah,
you have to wonder if all those moves were part of their paranoia and feeling pressure that they knew they were going to get caught eventually.
Which instead of just getting caught, they just decided to end those lives. And I mean, I hate to say it, but I guess the only positive is that they are gone as well.
Yeah, and again, it's a reminder that not everything you see on social media or people, when they're out, even and it was, all this happened well before social media. The family that always looked together when they were at church or down at school functions, or
right.
Right. Everyone can put on a face, and we just do it digitally now a little bit more than we used to. We'd send out the Christmas cards or the family letter every Christmas that talks about all the great things that happened that year. Never really brings up the hard stuff in the same way. So it's always a good reminder that take everything with a grain of salt, because you never really know the full story.
There you go. That's the B side. And of course, again, if you'd like any of the sources, if you'd like the pictures, you can always check them out on our website, asidebsidepodcast.square.site or asidebsidepodcast.com. You can buy us a coffee. We mentioned that. We've got YouTube, we've got Spotify, we've got Apple Music, all of the streaming services. Buy me a coffee. We do have another little fun bit for you on our Patreon that we've added.
And we're calling that the liner notes.
Liner notes.
Yeah, so it's the little bit of extra that you get when you've already got the cassette, but you want to find it's a little bit like backstory, or who played trombone on this album. You'll be able to figure that stuff out in the liner notes. So go to Patreon. There's a link on our Facebook and our webpage. You can sign up there. It's super cheap per month. It's just a fun little thing to do, trying something new, and I get to talk about cassette tapes more. So.
Well, there you go. That's episode 98. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you, Brooke.